God saved a wretch like me.
I once was lost, but now I'm found.
Was blind, but now I see.
There's grace that taught my heart to fear.
And grace my fears relieved.
How precious did thy grace appear.
The hour I first believed.
Oh, death, where are you? Where is your sting? How sweet the sound of this victory.
Oh, church, where are you? Come rise and sing. How sweet the sound of our victory. Oh, death, where are you? Where is your sting? How sweet the sound of this victory. Oh, church, where are you? Come rise and sing. How sweet the sound of our victory. Oh, death, where are you? Where is your sting? How sweet the sound of this victory.
Oh, church, where are you? Come rise and sing. How sweet the sound of our victory.
Hi, church family. I hope you're all doing well and that we're able to be together at church again soon. It's my privilege to read scripture for you this morning. Our first reading is 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 19 through 25. For it is commendable if a man bears up under the pain of unjust suffering, because he is conscious of God. But how is it to your credit if you receive a beating for doing wrong and endure it? But if you suffer for doing good and you endure it, this is commendable before God. To this you were called, because Christ suffered for you, leaving you an example, that you should follow in his steps. He committed no sin, and no deceit was found in his mouth. When they hurled their insults at him, he did not retaliate. When he suffered, he made no threats. Instead, he entrusted himself to him who judges justly. He himself bore our sins in his body on the tree, so that we might die to sins and live for righteousness. By his wounds you have been healed. For you were like sheep going astray, but now you have returned to the shepherd and overseer of your souls. And the next reading is John chapter 10, verses 1 through 10. I tell you the truth, the man who does not enter the sheep pen by the gate, but climbs in by some other way, is a thief and a robber. The man who enters by the gate is the shepherd of his sheep. The watchman opens the gate for him, and the sheep listen to his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out all his own, he goes on ahead of them, and his sheep follow him because they know his voice. But they will never follow a stranger. In fact, they will run away from him because they do not recognize a stranger's voice. Jesus used this figure of speech, but they did not understand what he was telling them. Therefore Jesus said again, I tell you the truth, I am the gate for the sheep. All who ever came before me were thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not listen to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. He will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full.
Good morning from the Miller living room to your living room. We hope that you're all doing well during this lockdown time. The Millers are doing well, and we're actually enjoying our time together. We're playing some board games and eating very well and enjoying some hiking and things like that. And so I hope that you're able to get out and do that too. We do miss you all and look forward to that time when we can all be together again. But for now, we'll enjoy each other this way. And today, there's a couple scriptures that I'll read for you for the message this morning. And the first one is Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. For you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. The next scripture reading is from Acts chapter 2, verses 42 through 47. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to the fellowship, to the breaking of bread and to prayer. Everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. All the believers were together and had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. Every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes and ate together with sincere hearts, praising God, enjoying the favor of all the people. And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved.
Good morning, friends, from my living room to your living room. I hope that you're comfortable, and I hope that you're ready to hear some words that God is going to speak to us today. We're kind of both in this together, and I'm excited to be here with you today. It is the fourth Sunday of Easter, and as the fourth Sunday of Easter, it's always been called Good Shepherd Sunday. A bunch of lessons about the Good Shepherd and his sheep, Good Shepherd being Jesus, and the sheep referring to us. And I would bet that for a lot of you, you're thinking to yourselves, when I hear about a sermon that's going to be on sheep and the shepherd, I pretty much know the story. I know what's going to happen. It's going to be about how God is the shepherd who cares for us all. We can't survive without the shepherd, and sheep that are really, really dumb and can't do anything on their own and need to be gathered together, and that's us. And there are some truths to that. There are some truths to those lessons. But what I want to talk about today, in this time that we're together, what I want to talk about is this. I want to talk about the Good Shepherd being a person who teaches us, not only cares for us, but teaches us how to endure in difficult times. Teaches us how to endure in difficult times. And I want to talk about sheep, not about how dumb they are, but about the fact that they're really, really smart. That sheep are pretty smart, but they're very defenseless. So I want to try to talk about a few things that may be a little bit different angle on what you've heard before. So stay with me on that. When I think of shepherds, I think of the years being here at Portage Lake Bible Camp and the years when I would teach my staff and tell my staff that you are going to shepherd the kids that come to camp. These kids that come need you to pay attention. Pay attention to everything they do. For the trailblazers, pay attention to them. They will be paying attention to you. For the junior hires, watch them, because if you don't watch them, they're going to get into trouble. Shepherd them. They're your sheep. You watch them while they're here. And I think about those days at camp, and one of my early summers up here, that myself and our trips director, a guy named Tony Moon, decided to take some kids on a canoeing trip. They were junior hires, and we were going to take them on the Pine River. Pine River is really the hardest river in this area. It's beautiful, but it is, it's going in and out. It's got rapids, it's got trees, it's narrow. It's a tough paddle. And we got a group that we said, you've got to know how to paddle. You've got to be good at this for us to take you. And we kind of took the kids at their word. We got them into the vans. We took them down. And we put the boats in the water. And we were ready to go. It didn't take very long that Tony and I looked at these kids canoeing. And we realized maybe we made a bit of a mistake because they were not very good canoers at all. They weren't terrible, but they weren't good. and it was really difficult getting through the river, especially the upper portions where there are more rapids. And as we were going through those rapids, there was one canoe that seemed to have it down. They just knew how to paddle. They were amazing. They were good at it. So they took off, they were ahead of us, and we kept up behind, keeping the rest of the group together, teaching and training, pulling over boats out of logs and, righting the canoes that had tipped over. And as we're going along, we stopped for lunch, and it was an absolutely delicious time, because when you're working out that hard, a sandwich anywhere in the woods is a good sandwich. And we got done with that, and we decided to take off. And the one really good canoeing group stayed behind just a little bit. They were going to finish a couple things and then catch up to us. And we'd seen them, and we knew they could do it. So Tony and I said, we're going to stay with the tougher sheep, the ones that don't know how to paddle well, and we decided to follow them up. We went a little bit further, and we came to a dam that we had to go and portage around, and we stopped at the dam, and we waited for that last boat to come. They still hadn't caught up to us yet. And we waited, and we waited, and we waited. We get a little bit nervous, and then we looked in the water, and down the river was a floating shoe that we recognized as one of the kids' shoes, and it floated down and went over the dam. And we looked at each other, and we're like, oh my goodness, what are we going to do? So we got in our boats, and we began to paddle back up the Pine River to find where they were at. And a group of paddlers came right away, and they said, man, you know what we saw? And we said, what'd you see? We saw this group of kids whose canoe was stuck under a log, and they're lost, and they're really bummed out. And they had told us that they had these leaders that took off in front of them and weren't there with them any longer. And we're going like, oh my goodness, what terrible leaders they would be. Terrible leaders. And we looked at each other, that's us, we better go. We kept paddling up the river a little further and a little further. Sure enough, they were starting to come down the river, and they told us what had happened. We laughed a little bit, caught up with the rest of the group, and we pushed forward. But Tony and I always remember that time when we were not very good shepherds. Because one of the key elements of being a good shepherd is paying attention, watching what is going on, and knowing your sheep. And we thought we knew these guys, but we left them behind. Thank goodness they were okay, and we learned a lesson on that. And the Bible talks to us, certainly in the 23rd Psalm, it talks about us being sheep and the good shepherd guiding us and leading us and caring for us. I don't know a lot, except for a few things that I've read about Middle Eastern shepherds doing sheep in the Middle East. But I do know something about sheep out in Maine. Every year our family goes to Addison, Maine, and Addison and South Addison are real near each other. And out of South Addison, there is an island just off the coast, about 3 miles. There's 2 islands called Nash Island, Bigger Nash Island and Small Nash Island. And on Nash Islands, there are sheep that live year-round. A woman named Jenny Cerrone is the person that had managed those sheep from like 1945 all the way until, 2004 when she died, well into her 90s. She was the one that cared for these sheep, and she was awesome. I mean, she grew up on the island as the daughter of the lighthouse keeper. There's a lighthouse on the island, and she was there from I think it was 2015 until 2035. She'd been there for almost 20 years as a kid, and she began to raise many animals there, but she raised sheep. And the sheep did really, really well. There are no trees, there's no cover, but the grasses and the seaweed that washes up along the shore was just perfect for these sheep. In fact, that island can sustain over 120 sheep, and does every single year. Jenny would get these sheep out, and she would care for these sheep out there, even though she wasn't there all the time. But she knew her sheep, and she knew what they needed when they were out there. They would go out in the spring, and they would care for the lambs. They would go out and they'd shear at the end of the summer, or I should say in the middle of the summer. And then they would go out at the end of the summer, and they would bring rams onto the island. It was a life that was planned out by the shepherd for these sheep on this island way out in the ocean. Beautiful spot. Now, there's some things that Jenny did with these sheep that make me think about how the great shepherd deals with us. As she cared for these sheep on this island, how Jesus cares for us. The first thing was that every spring she would go out and she would look for lambs that had been born that were not going to make it on their own. Weak lambs, small lambs, ones that had been rejected, ones that had been left behind, ones that just couldn't quite keep up. And she would go around with a few other people and they would find these poor little sheep and they would care for them and bring them back to South Addison, where they would feed them, care for them, and oftentimes have them live there for the rest of their lives, care for those sheep. I feel like God is like that with us, that God is always not only watching over the flock, but he's watching for that one or two sheep that just aren't making it, that just aren't being cared for, that can't make it on their own. The shepherd pays attention, and out of a flock of 120, notices the few that didn't make it. And that's the way God is with us. He notices you. He notices me. Especially when we're in tough times, when we're in difficult times. He notices us and cares for us. Another thing that Jenny did was she made sure they had no shelter on the island. I thought that didn't make any sense. It is out in the ocean. There's nothing but open ocean, winds and currents, and the winter comes and hurricanes, and these sheep are on the island, no shelter. She said that you provide shelter for them. They'll get weak and they'll huddle under there, and when the coldest winds blow, they will not survive. She said, my job is to teach them how to endure the difficult times so that they can live comfortably. Or live. The great shepherd, God, Jesus, helps to train all of us to have endurance so that we can survive the difficulties that we will encounter for sure. These difficulties will come, and the shepherd teaches us how to endure those things. 1 Peter 2:19-25 says this, for it is commendable if someone bears up, endures, right? If someone bears up under the pain of unjust suffering because they are conscious of God. It is commendable for us to bear up. If you suffer for doing good and you endure it, this is commendable before God. To this you were called, because Christ suffered for you, leaving an example that you should follow in his steps. It is good for us to learn to endure. When they hurled insults at Jesus, he did not retaliate. When he suffered, he made no threats. Instead, he entrusted himself to him who judges justly. The endurance that Jesus teaches us helps us to survive, and not only survive, but to thrive in a world that is filled with insults and filled with injustices and filled with suffering, and to endure in a way where we don't have to insult back, and we don't have to retaliate, and we don't have to threaten, but we can trust the shepherd is teaching us how we are to live. In fact, what God knows is that when we learn endurance and when we endure for what is good and what is just and what is right, we are drawn back to the shepherd. At the end of 1 Peter it says, for you were like sheep that had gone astray, but now you have returned to the shepherd and overseer of your souls. There's something about suffering and something about difficulty that brings us back to the shepherd. God knows this. And God knew this about us, that we were prone to go astray and that he needed to teach us how to endure, how to be drawn back, how to be made better. That's what the shepherd does. It doesn't just caring on the distance, but it's knowing you and allowing things into your life, sometimes bringing things into your life that test you and try you, and standing there with you, helping you learn endurance and drawing you closer to him. He's like our coach. He not only cares for us and loves us, but he teaches us how to be better. How is God teaching you endurance now? How is Jesus teaching you endurance and drawing you closer to him in this virus time? Or are we just like yelling back, or are we getting on Facebook or Instagram or emails, or are we constantly talking about politicians or people that are around and angry and mad, insulting and threatening? Are we developing endurance? We trust in the great shepherd. So the shepherd teaches us endurance, but we're sheep, right? And what do we know about sheep? We know that sheep are a prey animal. They are not the aggressor. They are not the ones that are out feeding. They're the feast. And they have no defenses whatsoever. They have nothing. They rely on their speed, and they're not all that fast. They rely on running, on being aware of their surroundings. They rely on getting together in a circle with other sheep. But if attacked in that circumstance, not much chance of fending off a wolf or a bear or a lion. They have keen senses. All of their senses are attuned to changes in their environment. They never walk in a straight line because they always want to have one eye looking behind to see what's coming. They're also very, very tolerant of pain, because if they appear to be injured, they know that they would be more likely to be attacked and consumed by an animal that was coming after them, by a predator. These prey animals, these sheep, have no defenses whatsoever. But one thing that Jenny Cerrone taught me, we went to her house in South Addison, and I opened the door, we were talking to her, and while we were talking to her, a sheep came up to the back door, kind of knocked the door open, and got some food from her. And I said, wow, that's pretty cool. I thought sheep were pretty dumb. She says, well, sometimes the sheep come to the back door, they knock the back door open, they come in, they open the refrigerator, they get their own food and head back out. She said, sheep are incredibly smart. Second smartest animal on the barnyard. Number one is the pig. She said, sheep are really smart. They just have no ability to defend themselves. They're defenseless. These sheep aren't good alone. They will follow other sheep into trouble. They're led astray easily. They need other sheep around them, but they also need the shepherd all the time to help them and to provide protection. It's not that they're stupid. It's that they're weak. And the shepherd helps them out. There's a story that I read recently that I want to give the author credit for. His name is Jared Gillian. And he talks about sheep and the relationship between the shepherd and the sheep that I think is fascinating and really gives us insight into how Jesus cares for us. And Jared was a man that grew up in New York City, and he went to New Zealand to live in the countryside. And on his farm that he lived on, there was some land, and the local shepherd had his flock, or part of his flock, grazing on his land. Well, he looked outside one day, and what he noticed was that one of the sheep was laying on its side, injured in some way. That he thought its backside was covered with poop, and it was laying there. And he called up the shepherd. He said, your sheep is down. Something's wrong. Something's hurt. You need to get over here. And the shepherd says, well, he's probably cast. And Jared goes, I have no idea what that means. What does that mean? And the shepherd goes, sometimes when the animals are either pregnant or they get off balance because their fleece is so long or they get wet, they fall over. And when they fall over, they're unable to right themselves. And as they lay there, they begin to fill up with gas because they're not able, the digestive tract kind of is on its side, and they eventually die in a matter of hours if they're laying there for too long. So the shepherd says, Jared, could you go out there and help this sheep to get right? And Jared's going, I don't know what I'm supposed to do, but yeah, sure, I'll help. Because he'd learned from being in the countryside that people in the countryside help each other. So he went out there, and the shepherd said, what you need to do is you need to step on both sides of the sheep, grab the fleece, pull the sheep up onto the feet until they regain feeling in their legs as they've been laying there for quite a while. If they've been laying there for quite a while, I guess their legs fell asleep or they just needed to gain some equilibrium. So Jared went out and got on both sides of the sheep and wanted to try to lift it up, but realized couldn't reach around it, so grabbed the fleece and lifted it up and held it up and held it there for a minute and then let go, and the sheep ran away and fell over again. And he went towards the sheep and he got on both sides and he lifted it up and held it there, and sure enough the sheep wiggled away again, went forward, fell over again. Jared didn't know what to do at this point, but he walked up one last time, went on both sides, held it up, but held it longer this time, for about 3 or 4 minutes, he says. And as he held it there, he let go and the sheep seemed to stay and stood there and then started eating some grass and slowly started walking away. And then as he watched as the day progressed, the sheep was fine. The sheep was okay. Called the shepherd back and said, man, I feel like I'm the great healer. I'm the sheep whisperer. I'm going to start my own sheep church because I'm bringing them back from the dead. And he says, that's what happens to sheep. They just get themselves into trouble like that. And that's what the shepherd does, is to save them when they're in difficult circumstances. You and I were a lot like cast sheep. May not be right now. May have been in the past, might be in the future. There are times when we fall down. There are times when we do things or say things, we get ourselves in trouble. We get ourselves depressed. We get ourselves down. And the great shepherd comes to us and lifts us up. Supernaturally. This is God. He lifts you up. He picks you up in an embrace that helps you know that he's there, that he loves you, and that he cares for you, and also in a way that gets you on your feet again and allows you to move about with his guidance as you move forward. We are all cast sheep. We're all sheep that are pretty smart, but we do dumb things. We are defenseless without the great shepherd. You guys, we all are in need of the shepherd to love us. We're in need of that shepherd to train us and to teach us how to endure and to draw closer to him. We need that great shepherd to pick us up when we fall, and we cannot get up on our own. And that's not only you, it's people that you know. Others that have fallen can be picked up as well. They bring Jesus into their life. This is not just like a good guy. This is like God. Supernatural. He watches over us. He teaches us endurance. He lifts us up. He knows us and pursues us. And I have a few questions for you this week. How is God building your endurance through this time period? Through this incredibly difficult time, how is God building your endurance? Do you lash out at injustices? Do you retaliate? Then you haven't learned endurance. Do you feel like all is lost? We need to learn some more endurance, because God, the great shepherd, Jesus, is always, always there. How is he building your endurance? Because through times like this, you will draw closer to God. That's what happens when Christians go through difficulty. We see the good shepherd and all he does for us. How is God showing you his love? How is God showing you his love today? Is it in people, in the activities of things around? Is it through prayer? Is it through times of worship? My hope for you today on Good Shepherd Sunday is that you recognize the Good Shepherd and the work he is doing in your life to develop endurance, the love he has for you, and the fact that he'll never let you lay there for long as a cast sheep. His love for you is beyond understanding. Be blessed this week. Share with one another concerns and recognize the great shepherd is there, particularly on Good Shepherd Sunday. God bless.
10,000